I'm coming off a 16-hour day yesterday, but I woke up with a smile because it's all for me. It's all for my company. I'm pushing in that direction. And honestly, historically, if I pulled a 16-hour day, which I have for other companies, I would feel like I was on a treadmill. But with
Mm.
this, I actually feel like I ran 16 miles and I'm somewhere else. And it's progress and it's tangible and it's visible. And it's great to be building projects and building my own company. I just feel like I'm a builder. So I'm like right where I want to be.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Future of Construction. Today I'm speaking with Zach Rapaport, founder and principal at Meerkat Companies. Zach, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Well, hey, I would love to understand first and foremost, just how did you get into construction?
Great question. A lot of people are kind of surprised when I say that I actually went to college for political science and legal studies. And now I do what I
Nice.
do. So I think that's testament that you don't necessarily need to do what you have your degree in. There's always opportunity to pivot. So when I graduated, I moved back home just because I wasn't sure what to do. And I had to study for the LSAT and, no income. So it's back to the parents' house, which is fine. My parents are great. That was not begrudging. But as I was sitting at the kitchen table and studying for the LSAT, my dad was like, an old school Long Island guy. And, he worked in construction and development, amongst other businesses. He owned an office supply furnishing company. But he comes home one day from the job site and he's like, dude, what are you doing? You
Mm.
look miserable. Why don't you throw on your boots and come out with me tomorrow and, see if you like it? And in my head, I was like, construction isn't really, what I would want to do with my career. It was a summer job for me. So that's kind of like how I always saw it. But I went out the next day and, I always like to tell the story because I think it's important for like my professional and even personal development. I showed up kind of like bright eyed and, ready to like, expecting to like be a PM and start like directing crews. And my dad, to his credit, he was, he liked to, he liked to, keep it interesting. He's like, whoa, where are you going? And I was like, what? He hands me a broom and a shovel and he goes, you sweep and you dig for a year until you learn what's going on here. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm a college graduate. And honestly, that moment was pivotal for me because I realized that it has nothing to do with necessarily the piece of paper. It's all about your attitude. It's all about, being able to dedicate your time and develop a passion and learn the experience that's requisite to becoming an expert in any field. And so I worked with him for about a year and a half, and we did a lot of storm relief work. That was right around the time of Hurricane Sandy. And so did a lot of storm relief work, single family home rehabilitation. And then after about a year and a half, I was like, you know what? I kind of want to do, other stuff. I want to move into New York City. I want to, just kind of set my career in that direction versus becoming a bit more solidified on Long Island. And he understood and he supported it. And so I started working with the GC that focused on doing retail work, some multifamily work, some restaurant work, and a little bit of hospitality work. Um, and I worked with that GC for many years. And I think that there was a pivotal moment for me when I was working with them in which I was managing a multifamily renovation. I was also managing a restaurant renovation, and I was also managing like a warehouse renovation out in Long Island City. And all three I liked. I liked the challenges that each brought. Obviously, there's, if you're in construction, you know that there's a Venn diagram of similarity between segment project types. I remember just feeling like we had finished up the restaurant, and when you finish a project, all you want to do is just get out of there. Like you're like, all right, I'm done, time to go to sleep. But I remember about a month later, I hopped out of the subway with a friend, and I was walking by the restaurant that I built, and I saw that it was filled with families having a nice meal out. Two people on dates. There was like people that were there for business meetings, and you could see that the staff was laughing and having a great time. And I was almost like struck at that moment. I was like, wow, I contributed to all of those people having an amazing time, and I like helped push it over the finish line, and I helped make that happen. All those people wouldn't be having those moments in that place if it weren't for me. And that's not meaning to, be self-inflating, but it helped me learn that past the paycheck, there needs to be a certain motivation. And that's why I'm not, building warehouses, and I'm not, doing necessarily multifamily work, even though it's important to build housing. I like to see the physical, fruits of my labor with people enjoying their time and enjoying the place that I built. By that notion, I built several restaurants after that, coffee shops. But one of the last projects that I did as a GC was with a company called Joe and the Juice,
Mm.
which is a Danish juice and coffee brand. And I did a couple of projects in New York and a couple of projects in Miami as well. And I finished up a project in Tribeca here in Manhattan. And the C-suite was in town and like the higher ups, and they asked me a question. They were like, "What's with all the change orders?" And I was like, "Listen, I'm sorry. It's just that your plans aren't great. You don't really you don't have anyone that's double checking these things. I think if you had someone who was able to assist with oversight, like they had a great point of contact, but I think that they were a little underwater." And I was like, I have a ton of GC experience. I've done this before. I know what to look out for when I'm hiring GCs. And I could tell that the gears were turning, and then they made me a job offer to come in house with them. And so I worked with Joe and the Juice for 2 years. We did a lot. I think when I came on, they had like 5 or 6 stores. And when I left, we had 40. So we did a huge expansion effort. And then after that, COVID hit. And I decided I actually wanted to get into hotels because I really liked the elements of doing restaurant work. I also loved the elements of hospitality, and like the systematic nature of doing a hotel renovation is something that kind of like tickles my brain in a way that's exciting. Like, monitoring, each room's progress, and it's like a game of Legos, or like assembling Legos, I should say. And so I worked in hotel development for 4.5 years. And at the end of 2023, I was like, okay, crossroads. What do I want to do? Do I want to go in house with another group? Do I want to strike out on my own? I think from working with multiple startups and being a PM of a small GC, you kind of run your own line of business.
Mhm.
So I've always had this kind of like entrepreneurial spirit, and obviously relied on a lot of support for back office and for people that supported along the way. But I kind of felt like I wanted to give it a shot. So March 2024, I decided to start Meerkat Companies. Meerkat Companies is a group of companies. It's Meerkat Projects and Meerkat Development. Meerkat Development is more on the like owner side, like we're acting as GP on some projects, and then Projects is more of like the third party project management side, and we work with clients that are doing restaurants, hotels. So I started Meerkat in March 2024, about a year ago. We just celebrated our 1 year. Uh,
Congrats.
Thank you. And since we started, we've gone from 0 active projects, 0 employees, 0 square feet under management, to 4 employees, 10 active projects, and nearly 150,000 square feet under development. So it's been a wild year. It's been great, very gratifying, very rewarding.
Huge congrats. I mean,
Thank you. Thank
doing
you.
something new is always massively daunting. And the fact that you can say a year later that you've had that much success is fantastic. So congrats. That's
I appreciate that. Thank you,
I
Chloe.
I know there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears behind that. So as a
You know,
fellow founder here.
Yeah, I'm coming off a 16-hour day yesterday, but I woke up with a smile because it's all for me. It's all for my company. I'm pushing in that direction. And honestly, historically, if I pulled a 16-hour day, which I have for other companies, I would feel like I was on a treadmill. But with
Mm.
this, I actually feel like I ran 16 miles and I'm somewhere else. And it's progress, and it's tangible and it's visible, and it's great to be building projects and building my own company. I just feel like I'm a builder. So I'm like right where I want to be.
Well, and we'll get into the technology aspect because I know you're using AI from an efficiency standpoint in some really cool ways. But one of the things that you had mentioned through your story and your journey of coming up in construction is that you had this and I know prior to starting our recording here, you and I were chatting about how we both had dads who were pointing out as young kids, I worked on that building, and that you viscerally felt that feeling when you saw folks using the developments that
Mhm.
you had created. I'm very curious because one thing you mentioned before we got on here was that you've primarily hired Gen Z. And, in a notorious environment where we're all going, they don't want to get out of bed and all of this stuff, right? And I will put my hand up and say that I'm in that camp where I've struggled to hire the next generation, even though I am, I'm a millennial founder. I would love to hear from you about, it seems like that similar kind of essence of I'm part of the fabric of the environment around me has been one of the kind of drawing factors. What's been successful for you in hiring the next generation and showing them that construction isn't dull?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that I find myself grateful and blessed that I didn't really have to like figure out the answer proactively. It just kind of happened. So my first hire, her name is Allie. She's great. She is actually still a student at NYU in their hospitality development and real estate finance program. And I was invited to give a guest lecture at one of the classes on developing brand standards for a hotel company and how integral they are with her cost efficiency and for operational efficiency. And throughout the presentation, I noticed that she was sitting front row, which was like good litmus test. Like, she's not hiding from the fact that shows interest. She asked a lot of questions, which I found awesome because, even not like separate of Gen Z, I think that there are a lot of people that just don't want to ask questions and don't want to put themselves out there, but she was assertive to do that. And then I handed out my card, after just in case to be like a resource and what have you. And she reached out like within days and asked for some input on her resume and some direction. And I'm like, my gears are turning. I'm like, I think that assertiveness is such a key characteristic in any business, but especially in real estate development and construction. Like, you need to hold your own, you need to ask questions, you need to be proactive. And she did all that. And so I kind of like mentored her for a little bit and guided her on how her resume should look. I sent her mine from back when I was a W-2, and she sent hers back to me, and it mirrored mine, but obviously with like a little bit less experience, but that's as expected. But I just started to think, I was like, she seems to be interested in this. I have a need for help. I don't know if I necessarily need full-time help, but who knows? It's like it's a low risk thing that, like, not low risk because I don't think that she's going to do well, but there would be like an end date to it in which she would be graduating, and then she would be able to decide if she wants to continue in this field or go into something else. And so I made her an offer to come on, and she started in January, and she learned so quickly. As a single person entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, whatever you want to call it, I didn't really have like a hard and fast or robust onboarding program. In fact, I didn't have one at all. It's more like, okay, I'm going to start putting you on emails, just start to learn names, start to learn, projects. If you see something that can be organized, organize it. I use the metaphor that like the house is a mess right now, but I'm inviting you over to like help me clean it up. So feel free to take initiative, do whatever you think makes sense. Ask me if you have any questions.
A duocracy at Mercator is like,
yes,
the duocracy. If you see something that needs to get done, just go and do it, but tell someone about it. Yeah.
I think I'm going to use that. I'm going to go back to my office after this and be like, hey, listen, new term, duocracy.
I love it.
But yeah, I mean, to me, I think the biggest litmus test is just people wanting to take initiative and reaching out. My second hire, his name is Joey. He just started this week. And he was actually connected to me through a friend that I had networked with and become good friends with. He had taken initiative in reaching out to someone who was in my friend's circle. And then it rolled up to me. And then my friends introduced me to him. And he was like, hey, you said you want to get into project management. Zach is, he runs a project management firm. He's one of the best that I know. You guys should chat. And it just so happened that it was time and a place. I needed more help. We had just onboarded 2 new projects in 1 week. And I was like, when can you start? And he was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And I was like, I know, but you seem hungry and you seem like you know what you're doing, and you write well and you present well and you speak well and you're interested. And that's the number one thing. I think maybe it's possible that I just got lucky with these two knowing that they were interested in something and that they wanted to dive into it. It's possible that the stories that you hear about how like people aren't performing in the way that they need to, maybe they're just square peg in a round hole. Maybe they just need to figure out what's right for them, and they're trying something and maybe it's not working. Not necessarily an excuse to underperform, but still understanding motivation is key to understanding how efficient someone can be. So
And what have you learned? What have you learned from hiring younger folks that keeps them motivated in an environment that's it's not tech, it's not, construction sometimes isn't as like sexy and exciting as like, AI and the types of,
mm,
new industries that are emerging all the time.
I would say that from like a corporate standpoint, I think being flexible, with like working hours and being very cognizant and more proactive actually in people's needs. Like Allie went to go visit her. I hope she doesn't mind I'm talking about her, but I think it's a good example. She went to go visit her family last weekend, and typically we're in the office on Monday, and I was like, if you want to visit your parents, like just hang out there for a couple of days. If you don't have to be back in the city, then I'll see you on Thursday. And like that's not necessarily a way to like motivate someone to work, but it is something that I think A is the right thing to do as a human, and then B it's a good way to confirm employee retention because I'm not going to be someone that needs your ass in the seat. Like if you're doing what you need to do and you have clear goals and tasks, then like more power to you. Do what you want. And then secondarily, I think something that's been really exciting for me and actually like quite gratifying and rewarding is when we do site visits, I can tell that the gears are turning in ways that I saw myself when I was, when I was earlier in my career. You're looking at a piece of paper that has a bunch of squares and rectangles on it. And then you look up at like basically a destroyed interior future restaurant and you're like, how is this going to happen? And then you see it happen. You see it happen week over week. And it's so rewarding to see, walking through the future back of house and being like, oh, this is where the chefs are going to be prepping, and like walking over to like where the 3 comp sink is going to be and like the dishwasher and be like, this is where sanitation is going to be. And you get to actually physically do it. There's a certain, reward. I keep going back to reward, but there's like a mental reward in the build. And there's a mental reward in seeing these things happen progressively and seeing something take shape, especially when it's like a beautiful restaurant that starts from a former bagel shop. Like that transformation is incredible to see. And so it's been really, I have like a proud experience in my career moment whenever we do a walkthrough and I'm like, I can see like the light in their eyes and they like the eureka moment where it's like, oh wow, like we're actually doing this, like we're building this. And so they get a new sense of appreciation for like when they go into a restaurant and they go back to their favorite restaurant and they see, wow, think about all of the time and coordination and weekly meetings and like RFIs and submittals and budget updates and photos and stress, honestly, stress that goes into this to get here. And then you don't see any of that when you're a guest. Which if you do it right, you shouldn't see any of it. And so I think that it adds a whole layer of acknowledgement and understanding that's really cool for them to experience because I don't think a lot of their peers who are going into tech, who are going into other fields that are not construction development, which are considered a bit old school. So
you get to see like peek behind the curtain and see how this kind of experience when you're in that position. And it's very, very cool to hear that it transcends generations, that it was just as cool when my dad walked in and saw his first project as it is for the next generation to walk in and be like, oh my God, this is what it looks like. And how in the world does this thing come to life? And then you watch stages and you go, oh my goodness, I get to be a part of the legacy and the storyline of that building. And now that building is mine. I have this like emotional attachment to it. And it's that in an environment where we are so glued to our phones or glued to the internet, that this like tangible and physical environment is still something that like draws us in. To see that you've paired that together with this next generation, and then that's really, you're allowing them to have that same experience, which is drawing them into the industry, because that's going to be critical, right? Especially with the shortages we're dealing with.
I also think that when you get to a certain level and you're working with a certain caliber of folks in design and construction, ownership groups, being around people that are passionate and dedicated is kind of intoxifying. It's like you can pick up on their dedication and passion. And so like I've also seen on calls where we've done concept reviews and such, like after the call and be like, what'd you think of that? And they were like, that was so cool
Ah,
to see, and to see all like the creative work that goes into it and how it's going to apply itself to the physical space. There's just a whole romance to it that it's so cool to see, because sometimes it's almost cool for me as well, because I get a little jaded sometimes. But
mm,
when I hear, like, I'm just like, all right, cool, another concept meeting. I've done like 45 of these things, but to see it with new eyes, because I'm seeing it, with my, newer to the industry personnel, is super cool for me too. I'm like, yeah, that is cool. Wow. Like, so
reinvigorates it for you too. I want to switch gears here because one of the things that you had mentioned as we were kind of prepping for this call, which really struck a chord with me because it's a lot of what we're doing with Mercator as well is, looking at what are all of the kind of data sets that describe construction activity or help us understand what's going on in a location, helping us to quickly qualify and unqualify. One of the things that you've mentioned that you really dive into is how you use AI when it comes to, assessing new development opportunities. I would love for you to talk about like how you've been using things like land ordinances and using AI to really better understand, is this even an opportunity or a possibility for us to build here?
yeah, no, it's a great question. I think what I found a lot of success in, especially when, we had chatted about like the quicker you get to a thumbs up or a thumbs down, the better off you are. Especially if it's a thumbs down, you want that time gap to be as little as possible. And of course, there's nuance to everything. But what I found to be really interesting is I'll get as much information as possible about the parcel or the building, whether it's as built or like a survey, any kind of, floor plans, or, even photos from Google can help as well. Google Earth. And I've actually started compiling all of those things and kind of like dropping them into like an AI bot kind of prompt, and being like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, 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 and being as clear as possible. Like, the building is currently zoned as this, this, this. I would like to do this, this, this. Is it possible to fit X rooms? Is this area zoned properly for like future hotel use or mixed use? If we want to do like a restaurant and hotel, or hotel and restaurant, whatever. And then something that has been really helpful has actually been either calling the local town and asking if they have their ordinance in a PDF format, their land use ordinance, or you can sometimes even just pop online and just download it. Usually it's available for download because architects and engineers need to use it. So if you dump all that in, I kind of like envision it as like dumping it all into like a cauldron and then stirring up. I should caveat that like that initial response is not often like 100% accurate, but it does help you guide in the right direction, because if it's unequivocally like, hey, the land ordinance says that this exact address is not within commercially zoned areas, and you're like, okay, this would be an uphill battle to go for like to go for a zoning variance, to go for like a waiver so that we can do it on, a non-permitted use. So maybe this one, the juice might not be worth the squeeze. But if you get a response from the chatbot that's like, hey, I think that this could be good. These are the things that you'd want to look out for. These are the things that you want to do, immediately. This is who you should even. It even says like you should call Mr. Smith at the planning department, and I'm like, wow, okay, so Mr. Smith is my next call. And that's not to say that I'm looking at these chatbots as like, oh, I don't know what to do. What should I do first? Like, I know what to do first. However, it is helpful to get that immediate readout that takes 10 minutes to do, compared to doing all of like the routine, historically routine and more manual review of the ordinance, review of the plan set to see if there's like feasibility on a construction piece, on a construction basis. So that's been something that's been really helpful for us when we see so many deals a day or a week, that it helps us kind of narrow our focus, and we don't give deals to capital partners that haven't been through this process. But the deals that have been through that process, we give them the capital partners, and we're like, hey, these are the open questions. We're going to work through them, but let me know if you're at least tangentially interested so I can keep you posted. And that has helped save us a ton of time as well. So I don't know how many people are doing that, but I found that it was super cool when I did it for the first couple of times.
Well, and quite novel as well, because keep in mind that, a lot of the times when I chat with folks and they talk about AI, they're going, oh yeah, that's something marketing plays with. ChatGPT is something that marketing uses, is to build decks, or it's to put social posts up. But in reality, you're using it as like a data processing and a natural language processing tool to say, hey, there's a lot of content and material here that I need to get through. And if I can get through it quicker, I can get to better decisions. Even if it's just my first pass, it doesn't have to be the end all be all. But if it's the first pass, it at least gives you that time back. And out of curiosity, one of the things that I often hear, even from our own customers, is like, what would I do with that time back? So what do you do with that time back? Well, what does that additional time back allow you to do?
I think, quite honestly, it allows me to work more on like internal corporate organization. As a new company, there's files that have been saved in different places, and I'll freely admit that. Like when I first started, and it was just me, I had a file structure. Now that we're onboarding more people, and now that we have more projects, we need to get a bit more refined. And the 30 seconds or 45 seconds that it takes to find something that's not where it should be, if you compound that, it gets a little out of hand. So with that time back, I typically use it for business development efforts. I use it to communicate and maybe write a bit more comprehensive on emails so that there's better communication between stakeholders on projects. I also help to organize my own company, do bookkeeping. So I'm saving on additional. I shouldn't say unrequired personnel, but before I get to the level where we're at a scale in which I can't do my own bookkeeping and receipt management, I want to try to keep that as in-house as possible. Not necessarily because I don't want to hire, but because I want to be as protective of the people that I hire as possible, because I just don't want to have to get too bloated and then have to let people go, because I've had to do that for my career as a W-2, and it hurts my heart every time. I've had it happen to me. And it's like the worst experience ever. It's loved ones of mine. And so I consider it like a major sign of trust to offer someone a position of employment. And I will fight thick and thin to make sure that that doesn't have to change, barring performance related and whatever. But like, I don't want to mismanage my company in a way that will allow for me to have to make those kinds of decisions unless absolutely necessary. And using these tools allow the people on my roster to feel a bit more secure that we're moving in the right direction, and they're psychologically safe.
Which is a wild jump from I used a chatbot to help me process information faster to I'm actually using that time back to create psychological safety for my own teams so that we can grow a sustainable company. And I think that that's such a fascinating outcome of efficiency. And we don't often think about that. We think, okay, it's been working this way this whole time. Why change it? Why change it? Because that time that you get back allows you to do things that allow you to build more sustainable companies and more sustainable organizations, which is wild. Sorry, I cut you off, but it speaks so much to my heart.
I was going to make a joke that now I have time to actually like meal prep for like Monday through Friday lunch, but we're past that point. You had such a nice, like serious moment. And I was like, oh yeah, I use it to like make chicken on Sunday. Like, I don't know. But I do want to touch on that real quick. I think that it might be like a generational thing, but a lot of the other company owners that I've spoken with that are more in my age group, like mid-30s, they are not using these tools to like squeeze as much margin as possible. They're using these tools to save themselves time and to allow for more conservative business ownership, so that we don't have to go through these massive layoffs, and so that we can, make sure that we have a war chest for when times are thin instead of thick. The people that I hire on, I want them to like feel really safe and to learn and to feel really happy that they work with me. And I don't want to have to, restart. I think that historically there's been a lot of, again, not to get esoteric, but I think that there's been a mentality in our world in which people are kind of like disposable, so to speak. Like, oh, they don't want to work here, cool, I'll find another one. Or like, oh, we lost that project, see you later. But if that person that they're saying see you later to has been with the company for 5 or 6 years, you're losing so much dedication and like intrinsic knowledge. And yeah, you could say, yeah, we have systems so somebody can pick it up, but you are going to lose efficiency. And if you can plot it out, you're going to get your efficiency is going to plummet for a little bit until that person onboards, and you'll feel the effect of it. Your margin might be a little bit higher for that quarter, but at what cost when you're not even reaching stabilization for at least 2 or 3 until they onboard and they actually get secure. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's that's how I see it. That's really how I see it. And I think it's important to have that mentality.
How do you see that mentality shift? I guess, like, have you introduced that or have you seen it be done successfully where that mentality shift has been successfully adopted in maybe more traditional organizations? And the reason why I ask is a lot of the stuff we talk about on this podcast is change and how to adopt change in construction and how sometimes it's incredibly challenging. And if there's ways in which we can help one another see the light on, why change is important or why taking a different approach is important. Have you seen it in your career? Have you experienced it?
Yeah, I think in the last, I would say 6 to 7 years, I've seen a pretty serious paradigm shift in folks that I know that are either starting their own thing or they're starting to work for new companies. The new companies that are coming out are not necessarily looking to raise an obscene amount of money and like overbloat and like base revenue and corporate footprint over like sustainable growth and P&L. And I think that obviously this is not, it's a generalization, but at least in my purview, anecdotally, I'm raising my or like I'm building my company based on revenue. Like we do what's within our power within revenue. And I use some of my savings to start it and buy a new MacBook Pro. But past that, it's funded by clients who put a lot of trust in us. And I think that creates a different kind of mentality versus like, hey, we just got a $25 million raise. Wow, that's a lot of money. What do we do? You hire 50 people. And if things kind of take a turn for the worse, you have no choice, but you're beholden to these investment banks to have to lay off a bunch of people. And then that creates so much strife and so much emotional insecurity, or economic insecurity. But I would say that by and large, the people that I know that are entrepreneurial are not looking to raise money. They're looking to bootstrap their company and grow sustainably because we've seen time and time again these things implode.
So you're thinking about there's maybe like an old guard in terms of how we built companies in the past in this industry, and this new kind of the new companies that are emerging and coming up are thinking about it as how do we do so sustainably instead of grow at all costs, because we have fewer people who are interested in entering this industry, and the ones that are so precious that we need to make sure that we're creating an environment where psychologically everyone can feel safe and know that they're part of something that's going to be sustainable, that they can be with long term. And I think
Yeah,
that that's the big thing is like, sure, there's been this kind of wave of people like leaving their jobs every 3 years, but what happens when we can create environments where people feel like they have a voice, they're in a sustainable company, they can be part of this and grow over many, many years. And as a result, then be part of a larger fabric of something.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think so many conversations that I've had with like single person firms of design studios and like even like general contractors that are like, one or two people that are like looking to start out, but they came from a big firm. Oftentimes when I'm just hanging out with them, I'm like, I oftentimes say to myself, like, it just comes up that maybe, maybe we don't need to merge with someone else and create one larger company. Maybe we don't need to buy up our peers. Maybe we can establish strategic partnerships in which we still have authority and we still have our own like sovereignty, but we're able to work together and maybe, be competitive with some of the larger firms that have done that whole like method in which they're, not allowing for like, agency with some of these smaller firms. And so that's also been really exciting for me too, to like be involved in these conversations with smaller companies that are like, I want to strategically partner with you on something so that we can go after these larger opportunities as a team, but not as like a conglomerate or like a blob that's absorbing everything along the way. And so that's been really cool. And it's something that I haven't seen in the past because you always hear about like so and so merged with so and so. And then it's this whole big thing. I think that we're going to start to see some larger headlines. Maybe it won't make headlines, but we'll start to hear about, so and so real estate development firm is entering into a strategic partnership with so and so design studio. They don't own the design studio. They're both still, mutually exclusive and independent, but they have a mutual understanding, a memorandum of understanding in which work that they get to the other, work that they get to the other. It's not always the same, but I do think that we're going to start to see more of that, and I'm excited for that.
I'm seeing that also in the construction tech environment as well, where it's
Mhm.
like there's almost a pushback to like, we don't all want to be, absorbed by a Procore, absorbed by an Autodesk, and then stripped for parts and then charged back,
Right.
customer for
Mhm.
way more. How do we kind of lock arms and become, a transformer of types of,
Yeah.
solutions that all work really well together, but have their own kind of sovereignty, like you were saying, or their own independence. I know we're wrapping up on time here, but one of the
Yep.
things that you'd mentioned before we jumped on was emerging tech. You've got a ton of hands and a ton of different pots in terms of what you're seeing. Would love to just hear about some of the cool emerging tech that you're seeing that you want to start either implementing or that you've come across that at least the audience can hear about and see if they want to dig into it.
For sure. The three that I'm going to mention don't necessarily directly correlate to what I'm doing, but similar to what we've been saying, the little guys got to stick together. The first one that comes to mind is it's a company called Adaptive. It's been founded by a guy named Matt Calvano. Small world. He actually worked for an investment bank that focused on hospitality investment, and I actually did a site walk with him in like April 2021. And then I saw that he left and he started his own company. And so we've been in touch, and I've referred him to some folks who have been interested in learning more. But they're building. It's a very niche product, but it's construction financing for smaller GCs and home builders that kind of don't really don't really have the capability of having like a really strong back office that's necessary for what their clients are requesting. So they integrate with QuickBooks, and then they provide these like really cool AI based insights into like job price forecasting, job cost forecasting. And since I'm not a builder, it's not directly corollary, but I do plan on, spoiler alert, I do plan on building Meerkat Builders as the third company within Meerkat Companies sometime in the future. But I definitely want to go back to my GC roots and kind of be vertically integrated with projects and with development. And then the second one that comes to mind is my buddy Raphael. He's building a company called Sites, SYTES, and it's a really cool, I guess I want to call it a marketplace, but it's more like a user interface for developers to post retail spaces that they want to have filled. And then the retail teams for the retail companies that we're talking like Jamba Juice, Auntie Anne's, can go on there and they can understand what the terms are immediately without having to like do a ton of go like back and forth like via email. It's all right there, and then they can submit their offer right on the platform, and then they can communicate within the platform. And so Sites allows that to happen, which I find really cool. And then the third, which there is a high chance I use actually. It's my buddy Dylan. He is creating a platform, or he's created a platform called Pillar. And Pillar is a development site platform in which you can kind of plug in what your criteria is as a developer. Even so far as like, I think it goes pretty detailed, and then it'll spit back kind of like within your criteria what sites would make sense for you to continue pursuing. So definitely check that out if you are in the like land buying and selling space, as well as the real estate development space, and you want to go out of ground. Lately, Meerkat specialty has been adaptive reuse and interior renovations, but I always keep my options open and I'm opportunistic. So
I love hearing about what other folks are digging into these days because there's so many different construction tech companies popping up that it's really great to hear from you, especially within your space, within your niche, what you're looking at or what folks within your network are building. It gives one visibility to those companies, but at the same time, it also helps us kind of those listening to the podcast understand what's actually out there and how are people actually using technology to solve some of these problems. So we'll post the names of these in the show notes so that people can reference them. For you specifically and for Meerkat, how can people get a hold of you?
you can shoot me an email, Zach, Z-A-C-H, at meerkatdevelopment.com. Check us out on our website. Follow us on Instagram. I think I changed it to Meerkat Companies from Meerkat Development, but you'll find us. I'm always doing like, walkthroughs of spaces and kind of giving pointers, 5 things to look out for when you're doing a restaurant renovation. I think I just posted one that's 5 things to look out for with an adaptive reuse project. We're doing a big one out in Cincinnati. So I did a walkthrough there, and a lot more footage coming up that I'll probably use my AI tools to find time to review and hopefully post, in addition to doing meal prep and all that. But this has been a pleasure, Chloe.
Honestly, Thanks so much, Zach. This has been a great conversation, and I really appreciated the fact that you came with actual tools and solutions that our audience can actually go and apply themselves. So thanks. It's been fantastic.
Really appreciate it. Great way to great second to last meeting for a Friday. So thank you.